There have been people in this town who, when we say we go to Fountain Street Church, say, oh, that's not a real church. You don't know how to worship. I said, oh, yes, we do. But we don't come here to worship. We come here to learn to worship, because worship is what we do with the rest of our lives. We come here to learn how to stand under the sky and feel the stars. We come here to learn how to look at a flower and hear a bird. We come here to learn how to worship the tree waving in the wind. We come here to learn how to work with care and diligence. We come here to learn how to worship with song, whether it comes out of our mouths or just out of our hearts. We come here to learn again and again that there is a mystery within us that is always reaching out to the mystery beyond us. We never get it right. That's why we do it every week. But sometimes we do a little better, and that is why we worship. I'd like to introduce my colleague in ministry, wonderful Christopher Rowe, who will give us a little bit more to take with us this day.
Good morning. Well, I have to admit, it's a little less poetic this morning and sermon-like because instead of common learning, I'm calling us into common connecting and common action. We are headed into several weeks of abundant opportunities to connect and act with one another and with our program participants in the Character School and in the Tower Club and in the Fountain Club and with one another. We are embarking on another Fountain Off Fountain Learning Week, which means you have 4 distinct opportunities, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, to connect with one another outside of this beautiful space. And so I will actually be sending out an all-congregation email to remind you about your opportunities tomorrow. But I implore you and I call you each to think about ways that you might want to find connection with one another this week outside of this space. And then next Sunday, please come back and please connect with our youth and please support them, because we are doing a big old book sale and bake sale next Sunday, and we could use your help. We could use your baked goods, and we could use your resources and your support, because we're going to D.C. It's a legacy trip. It's one that Fountain Street Fountain Clubbers have done many times over, and we're excited to do it again. And so please join us next Sunday for that. And in fact, those same Fountain Clubbers will be supporting us and connecting with us on the 19th. They're going to be serving us. They're going to be passing trays and other odds and end jobs at our homecoming dance. It's just one of the ways that we commonly come together and connect here. And then finally, at the end of the month, we're going to celebrate Halloween, because it's fun. Halloween's fun, and sometimes around Fountain Street, we can just have fun for the fun of it. So please join us on the 27th after the March of the Goblins. We're going to trick-or-treat in the social hall, because it's fun. And if you'd like to find ways you can plug in and connect with our youngsters as they go about the social hall, trick-or-treating, showing off their exciting costumes before they debut them on the 31st, there'll be more information coming for that too. So it's not exactly a common learning moment this morning, but a call into common connecting and action, because we have much to be thankful for and excited about in the lifespan programs here. And now's your chance to go a little deeper. Have a good morning. And I've been called to introduce the hymn. So please, in one voice, in the spirit of it, rise as you're able to sing hymn number 355, We Lift Our Hearts in Thanks.
hours, it was about gifts. We're at the point of the offering. And I want to talk about gifts for a moment. I'm going to give you something in return for your gift to the church. For those who don't know, this is my final year of serving you, and I'm featuring music I love all through the year. And for me, they're like biblical texts. They each have something to teach if you listen to them carefully. Last week, we heard a wonderful aria from the Pearl Fishers, stirring. This week, you get a whole book out of my Bible, The Marriage of Figaro. But that is a wonderful text and piece. Since I'm sharing the whole thing this morning, if only in glimpses, you're going to hear the overture as your offertory music. That'll help to set the mood. But let me set you up for the offering. First of all, you should know that this record, which includes that overture, is one of the very first I purchased. The recording was made in 1961. And I purchased it when I was 16, which makes it 1968. So it's a 50-year-old record, and it's in great shape, by the way. And I loved the overtures on this record, but I especially love the one that you're going to hear later. You're not going to hear this recording, by the way. We're going to hear something else. But this is not a theater, so why am I bringing it up? Well, the reality is we are, in some respects, an institution like an opera company. We present things that inspire and stir you. And the offering is a place where you can return the favor by inspiring us with your support. We're in the middle of our pledge campaign here, which, if you don't know, means we ask people who are committed to us to make a pledge of support throughout the year. And guess what? Your Sunday offering doesn't do that. Just to let you know, we collect about $1,000 on average from Sunday to Sunday, spread through the year. But it costs $3,000 a day to run the place. So we depend upon others, including you, to make a commitment as well. And if you haven't yet and you would like to, I wish you would consider it. We actually split our offering every week, halfway, to help pay the bills, but also to extend our ministry into the world. Not so we can have these wonderful musicians. That's the first half of your offering. The other half is so that we can be present to those who are suffering. And so we want you to think not only about what you're giving to support the church, but now double that, not divide it. I don't want you to take out that bill and say, well, half goes to the church. No, I want you to double your offering today so that you can support both the institution that surrounds us and the mission that extends far beyond us. With that in mind, I'm going to cue Danny back there, who will bring up the music, and then my wonderful ushers will come and siphon off all your money with gladness, right? But the music will make you want to give because it's wonderful. Danny, can you cue it up for me? What a curtain raiser. You just can't wait to hear what comes next, and you will hear parts of it. If we did the whole thing, you should have brought a sleeping bag. It's 3.5 hours. And it's the only, well, one of only 2 operas that when I hear the last notes at 11:30 at night, I want to yell encore and hear it all over again. It is that satisfying. But I'm going to start not in the theater. The creators of Figaro are 2 people. We know Mozart. The other one is Lorenzo da Ponte, who wrote the libretto. And they each lie in unmarked graves. Back in 1999, I had the chance to go to Vienna. I took the Strassenbahn down the Regenweg, and I found myself in the St. Mark's Cemetery, a little bitty plot, maybe as large as the one up here on Fulton, if that. And there's a little monument with an angel leaning on a broken column, and that's not Mozart's graves because he was buried in a common grave because ordinary people couldn't afford dedicated plots. It was very common. He's somewhere in there. I passed Lorenzo da Ponte's grave at least 50 times driving to and from LaGuardia Airport from Brooklyn because he spent the last 20 years of his life in the United States, died in New York, was buried in Manhattan, and then his bones were moved to Queens when they wanted to build a building on the old cemetery, and he and a lot of other people, undistinguished, their bones reside in Calvary Cemetery, and if you drive up the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway, you're going between both sides of Calvary Cemetery. So on one side or the other, Lorenzo da Ponte is waving at you. I mention this because it's a shame we can't go visit their graves, but what is a tomb after all but a gesture at immortality? And what could be more immortal than the Marriage of Figaro? The 2 of them actually conspired on 3 of Mozart's most famous productions. Marriage of Figaro first, Don Giovanni, and Così fan tutte. All of which are stories about power, corruption, inversion, betrayal, and of course love. The story that da Ponte scripted, from which Mozart drew his magnificent music, was actually one he stole himself. Da Ponte took a play by Beaumarchais called The Marriage of Figaro, Le Mariage de Figaro, about a servant who upends his role as a servant to deceive his lord and master. Because it was about servants deceiving lords, Louis XVI banned it in France. He did not turn out as well as he expected, I'm sure. But the result was that it was harder to produce. But da Ponte found a way to soften the politics and made it a farce about expectations, both about class and gender. It is set in Seville, Spain, and it's filled with schemes and plots, and it's a comedy in all of its forms. Now, I'm going to give you my first point that you need to be listening for all the way through. There is one difference between a tragedy and a comedy. A tragedy is a story in which everything goes right until it falls apart at the end. A comedy is exactly the reverse. It's a play where everything falls apart until it all works out at the end. And that's exactly what Marriage of Figaro is about. Thwarted, attempted, diverted, and otherwise distorted reality. So let's start the story. Figaro is a servant working for Count Almaviva and is anticipating a marriage to a fellow servant, the lovely young Susanna. They are going to live in the room next door to the Count and the Countess. And Figaro is boasting, see how easy it will be? He rings his bell and I will be right there. Susanna says, yes, and when you're out of the room, he can be right here. Because the Count, knowing that Susanna will be married soon, is intent on exercising what used to be called le droit du Seigneur, the right of the Lord to deflower the woman before she is married. And Figaro does not wish that to happen, and so he and Susanna are going to prevent it. They begin to quarrel as to how to do that, and then Susanna leaves the room, and Figaro conspires to find a way to take the Count and make a fool of him, to make him dance to his tune. Si vuol ballare, signor Contino. If you wish to dance, little Count, I will show you how. May we hear how Figaro plans to do that.
vuol ballare il signor Contino, se vuol ballare il signor Contino, il chitarrino le suonerò, il chitarrino le suonerò, sì, le suonerò, sì, le suonerò. Se vuol venire nella mia scuola la capriola le insegnerò. Se vuol venire nella mia scuola la capriola le insegnerò, sì, le insegnerò, sì, le insegnerò. Saprò, 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 piano, 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 e arcano di Simone scoprir potrò. L'arci schiavendo, l'arte lavrando, dico piangendo, dilatessando, tutte le macchine rovescerò. L'arci schiavendo, l'arte lavrando, dico piangendo, dilatessando, tutte le macchine rovescerò. Tutte le macchine rovescerò, rovescerò, rovescerò. Se vuol ballare signor Contino, se vuol ballare signor Contino, il chitarrino le suonerò, il chitarrino le suonerò, sì, le suonerò, sì, le suonerò.
Now, he gets together with Susanna and ultimately others to conspire a plot to prevent the Count from taking advantage of Susanna. They defy and mock the power of the nobility without them even knowing about it. And that's why it was originally banned by Louis XVI. Twists and turns happen so quickly you can't hardly keep up. Among them involves an adolescent boy by the name of Cherubino, which is Italian for little angel. But he's about 14, 15, maybe 16, which is why it's usually sung, actually always sung by a woman wearing men's clothing. It's called a trouser roll. And sure enough, later on, he'll have to pretend to be a woman. So it's a woman pretending to be a man who will pretend to be a woman later on. I told you it was confusing. But he is in love with love itself. Cherubino falls for everyone that happens to wear a skirt, but his chief love is for the Contessa. However, he first confesses he is overwhelmed by these feelings in front of Susanna and the Countess, if I remember correctly. And so, Cherubino, could you come and confess your overwhelming sense of being in love with every woman there is?
Non so più cosa so, cosa faccio, ogni foca rossonda di ghiaccio, ogni donna cangiare de calore, ogni donna mi fa palpitare, ogni donna mi fa palpitare, ogni donna mi fa palpitare. Sono nomi d'amor diletto, mi si turba, mi salta, rimetto, e mi sforzo d'amore, un desio che non posso spiegare, un desio che non posso spiegare. Non so più cosa so, cosa faccio, or di confare sonda di ghiaccio, ogni donna cangiare de calore, ogni donna mi fa palpitare, ogni donna mi fa Il suon dei vagli accenti parlano mio con sé. Parlano mio con sé. E se non ho chi m'ama, e se non ho chi m'ama, parlo d'amor con me, con me. Parlo d'amor con me.
What you can't hear because Robert Byron's cannot be an orchestra unto himself is the shimmering of the strings that's going on underneath. It's a breathless sound. It evokes the sense of a young man in love that he can't even breathe. He's so awash in the hormones of youth. Then follows a scene in which the Count, sensing something is up, tries to gain entrance to the Countess's room. He knocks, but they won't let him in because Cherubino is there, and it's unwise to have a single man in the same room with a married woman, so they conspire to hide him behind the chair. He gets in, the Count does, and then suddenly Dr. Bartolo, is it Don Basilio? I can't remember which. Another fellow shows up, and the Count has to hide, and the Count hides behind the place for the Cherubino. It's a mess. It's a farce. You don't know what's going to happen next. But in the end, the Count knows something is up, and he knows Cherubino is about part of it. So he sees Cherubino and says, "You, sir, you're going to serve in my regiment at the front. Be gone." And suddenly Cherubino is banished. What to do? Well, Figaro then, where are you, Figaro? You ready? Get up here. Figaro, being the older man, then instructs Cherubino in the perils and trials and glories of military life in what is perhaps the most famous piece that in the opera, which you may well have heard before. Signori.
Non più tra il farfallone amoroso, tutto il giorno d'intorno girando, e le belle trovano riposo, narcisetto l'uncino l'amor. E le belle trovano riposo, narcisetto l'uncino l'amor. Non più avrai questi bei pennacchini, quel cappello leggero gallante, quella chioma, quell'aria brillante, quel vermiglio d'onesco color, quel vermiglio d'onesco color. Non più avrai a pennacchini, quel cappello, quella chioma, quell'aria brillante. Non più andrai farfallone amoroso, notte e giorno d'intorno girando, e le belle turbando riposo, narcisetto l'uncino l'amor. E le belle turbando riposo, narcisetto l'uncino l'amor. Fra guerrieri può far bacco, gran mustacchi stretto sacco, troppo in spalla, sciabla a fianco, collo trito, uso franco, un gran casco, un gran turbante, molto onor, poco cantante, poco cantante, poco cantante. Et invece del fandango, una marcia del fandango, per montagna, per valloni, con i nevi e salioni, al concerto di tromboni, di bambardi, di cannoni, che la pali in tutti i tuoni, i salvetti o franciscar. Non più avrai a pennacchini, non più avrai quella chioma, non più avrai quel cappello, non più avrai quell'aria brillante. Non più avrai farfallone amoroso, notte e giorno d'intorno girando, e le Narcisetto d'amor, delle belle tornando riposo, Narcisetto d'amor. Per Rufino alla vittoria, alla gloria militar, per Rufino alla vittoria, alla gloria militar, alla gloria militar, alla gloria militar.
Because it's in Italian, you don't know the words, but you should. Along the way, he's saying, no more gallivanting around, skirt chasing, no more time for sending mash notes to the women in your life. It's time to become a man and join the army. He says, plenty of honor, little pay, and instead of dancing the fandango, you will march through the mud, through mountains, through valleys, with snow and with sun beating down to the beat of the bugle of bombs and cannons. Those are the tromboni you heard. Those whose thunderous report makes your ears ring. He's making a very bad case for the military life. And then he says, Cherubino to victory, to gloria in battle. It's a sarcastic aria. And yet it has this stirring quality that brings down the curtain for the first act. When it comes up, there is the Countess. We haven't even seen her yet, but she's been watching it all happen ever so gently and very worried because she's aware of her husband's planned infidelity. And as she does, she asks for love to give her some remedy for my sorrow in an aria called Porgi amor. Contessa, per favore. It is a farce in every sense of the plot, but it is becoming more of a drama at every stage. While you're not looking, Mozart and Da Ponte are skewering the aristocracy, lampooning the military, mocking the legal profession, proving that men are full of themselves And women are wiser than anyone realizes. Susanna and Figaro, together with the Countess, refine their plans. Cherubino has not left. He's sneaking around trying to avoid the Count who has told him to leave. He comes into the room because he has to tell the Countess of his love. And so, as he stands there in the room, Susanna says, "Go ahead, sing, it's all right." And so then Cherubino confesses his love in song. Come on, Cherubino, get up here. To the Countess, in one of the other great arias, "Voi che sapete," you ladies know what love is. He's right.
Voi che sapete che cosa è amor, dove vedete sia nel cor, dove vedete sia nel cor, quello che io provo vi ridirò, e per me nuovo capir non so, se tu lo vedo pien di desir, cora e deleto, cora e mardir, Cielo e poi sento l'alma pampar, e non momento non gelar. Ricerco bene fuori di me, non so che avviene, non so cos'è, sospiro e gemo senza voler, palpito e tremo senza saper, non trovo pace notte né dì, amor mi piace conduir così. Voi che sapete che cosa è amor, dove vedete sia nel cor, dove vedete sia nel cor, dove vedete sia nel cor.
Now would be a good moment to tell you about what two other people thought of the Marriage of Figaro. One was Johannes Brahms, who at some point after hearing it said, "It is every note a miracle. Not even Beethoven could do it." So if Johannes Brahms says so, it must be true. It is also a fact that it's quite long. And then after the Emperor Franz Joseph heard it, said, "Very nice, but too many notes." To which Mozart replied, "Only the ones I needed." So you're getting only the briefest of glimpses and only the hint of the plot. There's so much more going on that I can't give you because it's impossible. But I can tell you that, fearing for Cherubino and sensing an opportunity, Figaro suggests that Cherubino dress as a woman and hands him off to a maid, and they're about to do that when the Count comes knocking again. They hold him off as long as possible, confuse him another 2 or 3 times as Susanna and the Countess and Cherubino and Figaro running left and right and backwards. Eventually, Cherubino jumps out a window and lands in the garden. Now enter 2 characters you're not going to see today, Don Basilio and Marcellina. Why do you care about them? Well, Marcellina has a contract. Figaro has borrowed money from her and says, if you don't pay me by a certain date, you must marry me. The Count is ecstatic. I can enforce this contract. He can't marry Susanna. Ah ha ha! I can make good on my lurid plans. Figaro says, well, I can't get married. I need permission from my parents, and I was a foundling, so how would I know who they are? And he tells the story of how he was left by a road and how he was picked up by a family, and that and it turns out that Marcellina gave up the foundling and that she is his mother. Only in opera would such a thing happen. It also turns out that Raffaello, now known as Figaro, has a father in Dr. Bartolo. And suddenly the Count can no longer prosecute the contract. He's exasperated beyond all measure. The story depended. Let me move on so I can make sure I'm on the same page. It's complicated for Mary. Elsewhere, though, Susanna, the Countess, is waiting for Susanna to return to her room. And she, again, has an aria that speaks of a depth that we don't usually see in a farce. This one is called Dove sono bei momenti, and it leads up to it, but it means, where are they now? The beautiful moments as she feels the loss of the romance she and the Count had in their younger days and wonders if it can ever come back again. Contessa.
E Susanna non viene. Sono ansiosa di saper come il Conte ha cosa la proposta. Quanto ardito e progetto mi par. Ed una sposa si vivace e gelosa. Ma che cangiando i miei vestiti con quelli di Susanna i suoi momenti al favore della notte. Oh cielo, quanto mi è stato fatale, io sono ridotta d'un consorte crudel.
Brava, brava. Now, did you hear how the aria changed? It was very plaintive. You felt like, oh, this poor woman, she's having a terrible time. And then it changed in the middle and became more robust. And her attitude changes. At that moment, she is no longer just taking it. She says, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to take this bull-headed count by the horns and bring him to heel, and he will remember why he married me. That's essentially what it comes down to. And you can feel it. There's an almost martial quality to that. The steel and resolve in her, and sure enough, that's what happens. She and Susanna get together. They're going to trap him. They're going to write a letter. You feel free to get up here and get ready, girls, because Contessa and Susanna are going to write a letter to the Count, supposedly from Susanna, who will be saying, hey, Count, now that I'm okay, I'm going to be in the garden. Why don't you come and see me tonight? And they give her a little token to help him find the way. But when they go to the garden, they're going to switch places. But right now, they're just working together, the two ladies. And the sounds will be so beautiful. But what they're up to is nothing but mischief. 25 years ago, there was a now famous movie, The Shawshank Redemption. If you've seen it, you recognize the tune. One of the inmates, the hero, I suppose, in the movie, barricades himself in the warden's office and plays this record over the PA to the prisoners in the yard, a PA that always announces discipline and threat. And as they're in the yard, they're hearing the music, and they all stop. It's nothing like they've ever heard come over the PA before, and they are transfixed by the sound, so unlike their world. One of the characters, I believe the one voiced by Morgan Freeman, says, "I have no idea to this day what those two Italian ladies were singing about. I'd like to think they were singing about something so beautiful it can't be expressed in words. And it makes your heart ache because of it." That's how this piece feels to me. The words everywhere are pure or simple. Sometimes they're stereotypical. Sometimes they're misogynistic. They're classist. They're all sorts of bad words, but the music lifts them away from the obvious and imparts humanity in them. Those two women who just sang, one is a servant, one is the mistress, and yet they sing together because they have common cause. They transcend their class in order to defeat someone who would be undoing one of them. What began as a cardboard satire has become an actual drama between characters we care about. The Count is a lout, and yet we see humanity in him notwithstanding, because he is duped at every turn, and we feel bad when he stumbles over things. Figaro is supposed to be the hero, and yet it turns out he is as prone to jealousy in his way as the Count in his. And Susanna, who has only one aria of her own, is truly the hero of the whole piece, making all of it work together, preventing calamity, avoiding catastrophe. Of course, it all comes, like I said, to a riotous conclusion when everything falls apart, and yet it works out. Having received the letter, the Count goes in search of Susanna at night, and in the process sees Figaro serenading his wife over here. The Count, seeing proof of her infidelity, interrupts the scene and says, "Help, help! I need armed men." And he demands that the woman take off her cap, take off her veil to reveal that she is, in fact, his wife. She does, and it turns out to be Susanna. He doesn't know what's going on. "What's going on?" he says, and a voice from off stage comes in and says, "May I plead for them on my behalf?" Oh, it's the Countess. It turns out the Count is the one who is truly unfaithful, and the Countess has been truly faithful. The Count is baffled. He realizes he has been exposed to everyone, that his pomposity has been exploded. And he begs forgiveness. He begs the forgiveness he was refusing a few moments before. Now, what happens next, I'm going to put off for just a moment or two. But you folks can begin to get up here on the stage, because I want it to happen as soon as I'm done. So wander on up here, people. What happens next makes me feel exactly the way that the man in the movie did. They're singing something so beautiful and so important that I cannot understand what they're saying, but it is beyond belief. In fact, what happens is, and I'll get up here in the pulpit, the Count, that's the gentleman now who was playing Figaro. That's the Count. He has been undone. And he turns to his wife and begs her forgiveness. And while he's not going to do it today, in most scenes he literally gets down on one knee. And she looks down upon him. Her words, though, are the ones that matter. He says, "Perdono, perdono." And then she thinks for a moment and sings, "Più docile io sono." I am nicer than you. That's literally what it means, kinder. Or to be more poetic, more gentle I am. And I say yes. see. But the music takes it beyond these words. Until now it has been fast and busy with scurrying about sounds like the overture. You know, people are doing this, that, and the other thing. The mood has been almost sneaky and silly, highlighting all the backing and forthing. Oh, what a tangled web we weave, as the poem says, when first we practice to deceive. But when the Count realizes what has happened in front of God and everybody and falls on his knees, the music comes to an absolute halt. He sings with just the lowest of strings to give him support, almost alone, because he is alone in that moment. And she replies with just a few more strings, and it becomes a hymn. Now, because I want these moments to be the last ones you hear before the prayer, I'm going to add the sermon part right now, but it won't take long. Do you remember the formula? Tragedies, everything goes right until they fall apart. Comedies, everything goes wrong until they turn out right. Well, that's what the Bible is all about. Have you ever read the Old Testament? Everything gets worse and worse and worse. And yet Israel survives against all odds. Remember the New Testament? What happens? Things go from bad to worse, even to the grave, and yet things work out. The Bible is a comedy, and we want it to be. Because we want to think that our follies and stupidities will not be the last word. Because guess what? Everyone in this room every day should get on their knees in front of someone that they have failed to serve. We are all culpable. We don't deserve to be forgiven. Just ask any Calvinist. And yet every day we forgive each other again and again. It's what we would call magnanimous. And magnanimous literally means large-souled, to be larger than yourself. It is the English equivalent of Mahatma, as in Mahatma Gandhi. When we forgive, we are magnanimous. We let our soul be larger than our anger. We let our heart be larger than our grudges. And we enact every day the promise that religion offers, that somehow this life can be redeemed each and every day, that we can get on our knees and someone will say, I forgive you. And of course, that means someone will be asking you the same thing. We just passed Yom Kippur, when we were supposed to make up with everyone in the world if we want to move into the next year. That's what this opera is about. It says no matter what you've done, if you ask forgiveness, it will be offered. And if someone asks you, let your soul grow and say yes. The Countess forgives the Count. She does not forget. He won't forget. They won't forget. Because if you forget the reason you gave forgiveness, it's as though the forgiveness never happened. But we forgive and remember. We remember that we are all sinners in this world and need to be forgiven every day of our lives, and mostly by one another. And if we are a spiritual community, the practice of forgiveness is literally how we grow our souls. And so I want you to hear this scene as a religious moment when the Countess, God, extends forgiveness to feckless man, and everyone agrees that that is as it should be. Signor il Conte, the moment has come.
Io
Bravo, bravo. Grazie. Signore, signore, bravissima. 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 I now beg your forgiveness for taking you past the 12 o'clock hour, but I think it had so many notes we had to hear all of them. But we do have time for a prayer and a time for making this an hour of worship, even if it's a little more. Gather your hearts in a spirit of prayer, would you? Each and every day we stand in need of forgiveness. There is not a day when we do not owe something of a debt to someone by omission or commission. Yes, we should try to be more just and more wise and more good and be more kind and loving, but we are imperfect creatures and we will stumble and fall each and every day. Oh, how many things we have left behind us that pull us back into the past because we cannot forgive this or forget that. And yet each day we are given a new chance to be present in the world, to be washed not in the blood of the Lamb, but in the hope of tomorrow. Because we can, if we cannot make it right, we can make things better than they were. And so let us be generous, large-hearted, large-souled, Mahatmas one and all. Because it is time for us to grow our souls through the wonderful practice of forgiveness. Perhaps there is someone in this room right now to whom you owe an apology or who owes one to you. Can you forgive? Can you ask forgiveness? Can you remember what happened and hold it not against them, but hold yourself against them in the embrace of understanding and hope and love? And so we pause gratefully in prayer as I lift up the names of those who week by week we remember, whose lives came to their conclusion at this time in years past, who in these years that they served, however imperfectly, nonetheless raised this place for us and made it present for us. We ask their forgiveness that we have not been as true as we could have been, and we give them forgiveness as well. We lift up the names of Bob Borey and Willis Nelson, of Rex Francis and Jim Maguki. God, filled with mercy, dwelling in the heavens' heights, bring proper rest beneath the wings of your presence to those who have gone to their eternal rest. May you, who are a source of mercy, shelter them beneath your wings, bind their souls to you and to we the living, that they may rest at peace, so that we may be at peace. And let us say, amen. And we will sing Life as Loveliness to Sell, hymn number 329, because we have just been sold the most wonderful loveliness, and it is time for to say great thank you for it by singing hymn number 329. If here you have found comfort, go forth and share it with a hurting world. If here you have dreamed new dreams, dream them larger in a world that they may come true. And if here you have felt love, give some back to a bruised and hurting world. For by this we grow our souls and make a world worth living, not only for ourselves, but for our children and our children's children, knowing that this and every day is a gift, indeed a day which the Lord has made. So let us go forth, rejoicing and be glad in being glad in it. Amen and amen.